All right, hello everybody and welcome to our webinar. We're excited to have you with us today. Today's webinar is titled Standing Out in Your Interview. Now we will go into a couple of housekeeping slides. You will likely see a GoToWebinar panel on your screen. If you want to minimize the panel, click on the orange arrow and the box will minimize. The material that we're covering is about 30 minutes or so. At the end of our presentation, we will answer questions. So if you think of a question at any point, please type it into the question box. If you're listening via computer speakers, all you need to do is adjust the volume on your speakers to hear us. You do not need a microphone. Diversity Jobs has redesigned our new website that launched February 25th. We want you to be able to bring your authentic self to your job search by connecting with diversity-focused employers and communities that are relevant to your career goals. Access complimentary blogs, webinars, and other resources to ensure you stand out in every aspect of your job search and land your dream job. Take advantage of job fairs and events and gain more knowledge with Porschea's course, Ace the Interview Guide, which will be available in the follow-up email. Porschia Parker-Griffin is founder and CEO of Fly High Coaching and the Millennial Performance Institute. She is a certified professional coach, a professional certified coach, a Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Master Practitioner, and an Energy Leadership Index Master Practitioner. Porschia also has experience as a director and business consultant in the financial industry, helping companies unlock millions of dollars in potential hiding in their companies. Porschia is currently studying for her master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology and has a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from the University of Georgia. She also served as an associate training coach for the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching and has been recognized as a career expert by LinkedIn. Porschia serves as a career contributor for the Biospace and has been featured in FlexJobs, Levo, iOffice, and the Rochester Business Journal. My name is Josh Subcheck, and I'm the Associate Product Marketing Manager with Circa, and I will be your moderator today. And now I will hand it over to Porschia.
All right, thank you, Josh. Thank you, Josh. I want to say hello again to everyone, and thank you all for joining us for this presentation. I am excited to share this information about interviewing and how you can stand out during your interview from all of the other candidates out there applying for the same job. I know that your time is precious and I appreciate you making it a priority to be here. During this presentation, we will also find out how to apply successful interviewing tips and skills to improve your results. Now, more than ever, job candidates need to know how to set themselves apart from others during the interview. And like Josh mentioned earlier, for those of you who'd like to know more, at the end, we're going to provide access to a resource that's going to help you put all of this together so that you can ace your next interview. So let's jump right in. For those of you who were with us last month, you might remember that I like quotes. So we're going to start off this presentation with a quote as well. I will prepare, and someday my chance will come. And that is by Abraham Lincoln. And we all know how wise Abraham Lincoln was. And we can apply some of that wisdom to our job search and our interview preparation. As a coach, one of the things that I've seen over the years with hundreds of clients is that most people overestimate their interviewing skills and they think, I don't need to do much to prepare. And that is a fallacy that we're going to talk a little bit more about. So you are in the right place if you want to learn more about the STAR method for behavioral interviews and how it helps you to stand out. Also, if you want to understand how using the STAR method will help you build confidence for the big interview day. Also, we're going to talk about 4 ways to be more likable during an interview and why that is important. And then finally, if you just want to feel more prepared for your interviews, you're going to learn some things today that will help you to do that. So a little bit about us. Josh read my bio, and I appreciate that introduction. As he mentioned, I'm Porschia Parker-Griffin, founder and CEO of Fly High Coaching. And for almost 9 years at this point, I've been helping executives and professionals to find their ideal career, generate an awesome income, and create a life that they love. And we've been helping them to do that through our core competencies, career coaching, job search strategy, resume and LinkedIn profile writing, interview preparation, and entrepreneurship. So that's going to take us to our first poll, Josh. And I want everybody to think, if I were to say, you have an interview tomorrow, do you feel prepared to ace that interview? First option is no. I'd feel overwhelmed or anxious. The next one is maybe. I'd feel like I need to research the company. Another option is maybe. I'd feel like I need to practice or rehearse. And then the last option is yes. I'd feel prepared and ready. So go ahead.
So give it a couple minutes here and I will, or seconds here, and I'll close it out. All right.
All righty, it looks like we've got a little bit of everything, but mostly the maybes, right? They're researching the company and then feeling like they need to practice or rehearse. Sounds like most people. Good insights there. Thank you for sharing, guys. All right, so I want to let everyone know you are not alone. These are some interesting stats that I found about the current job market. I'm sure that just about everyone on this webinar has heard about the Great Resignation. They've been talking about it for months. Basically, there are a lot of people leaving their jobs for a myriad of reasons. We've got health and safety reasons. People have more responsibilities now. Also, people have just decided that they're going to follow, their purpose, and maybe they did not like what they were doing before, and they want to get to something they actually enjoy. So for those reasons, there's a lot of movement right now in the workplace and on the job market. The good thing about the Great Resignation is that it has created what we call a candidate's market, right, when it comes to the job search. So that means that you, as the job candidate, you have a lot of leverage right now. These companies want to fill these open positions, and they want to fill them with qualified candidates who would be a good fit. And that's you all here on this webinar. So it's important for us to know what we are up against, right, what the market says. So on average, 118 people apply for a single job. So that lets us know that even though it's a candidate's market, there's a lot of competition. Also, I want to mention that if you're applying for jobs at some large corporations that are highly recognizable, think Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, or Meta. If you're applying at corporations like that, you'll see substantially more applicants for a single job. One of our clients was applying for the software company Adobe, and the recruiter was open and shared with him that there were 500 people who had applied for the same job, right? So there is a lot of competition. Most job interviews last between 45 minutes to an hour. Not too shocking there, but also know that if you are going through an alternative interview style, maybe a group interview or a panel interview, they tend to be a little bit longer. 91% of employers prefer their candidate to have work experience. Again, not a huge shocker, but if you are trying to transition into a field or an area where you don't technically have the work experience on paper that they're requesting, again, everything we're going to talk about today is going to apply to you greatly. And then you want to think more about your responses and your interview preparation. 47% of candidates failed the job interview because of lack of knowledge about the company that they applied for. So I like that a lot of you said maybe, but you wanted to do that company research. Well, it's really kind of shocking to me that almost half of candidates don't get the job just because they are not knowledgeable about the company, right? So you've got to do that research, and we'll talk a little more about that today also. The average interview process is between 3 to 4 weeks. We tend to see that, but again, if you're going for the large corporations, we have clients that say they went through 7 rounds of interviews and it took them almost 3 months to get in at some of these large corporations. So just know that it could be a longer process. For those of you who were on the call last month, you will remember that this is kind of similar to what we talked about, in that you only have 7 seconds to make that strong first impression. So that is in an interview, but that's also with your resume and your professional branding documents. All right, so let's talk a little bit about behavioral interviewing, because it has become so popular because, surprise, surprise, many candidates lie during job interviews, right? So an interviewer could ask someone, are you reliable with meeting deadlines? And most people would say, yes, I'm reliable with meeting deadlines, even if they're terrible with meeting deadlines and they can't get up on time in the morning to save their life, right? So after being burned, employers have thought, hey, there's got to be another way to figure out if someone really has the skills that we're looking for, as opposed to just taking their word for it. And so that is why behavioral interviewing has become so popular. Behavioral interviewing is rooted in psychology, and it really is a probing kind of technique for a specific time in your past where you used a certain skill, maybe you demonstrated a specific behavior, or you applied some type of specialized knowledge. Some people refer to this interviewing style as storytelling interviews, because they can put you in a situation where you're telling a story about a specific circumstance and how you acted or performed in that situation. The interviewer is typically looking for you to explain your thought process and your actions to achieve success. So again, it focuses on that past experience. They're looking for those specific examples from your past. So here are some examples of common behavioral interviewing questions. And you might notice that some of them are not really questions at all. They are statements. So the first one, tell me about when you had to successfully navigate deadlines. Can you tell me about a period when things didn't work out well? How do you handle setting goals? Can you give me an example? Tell me about the most challenging project that you've handled. Tell me about a moment when you took initiative. And how do you deal with stressful situations in the workplace? These are some good examples of behavioral interviewing questions. And what you can see just from reading these questions is they're pretty deep questions in that those people who think, hey, I can just wing it. You know, I go through life and I wing it all the time. These types of questions can be very difficult to just wing it, right? So you definitely want to think about them ahead of time and prepare for them. So the STAR method is a popular way to answer behavioral interviewing questions. It involves a few things, right? So you providing the background details of a circumstance or project and an overview of your approach and the outcomes that were generated. When you're using the STAR method, you want to be sure to discuss the who, the what, when, where, and how of an experience. So let's break this down a little bit more to talk about what the STAR method specifically stands for. The S stands for situation. So this is where you are describing the context of what was going on with a project or a challenge. This is where you want to tell the interviewer about the background of your assignment. Give them an idea of the circumstances that were involved, right? The challenges that you were up against. The T stands for tasks. You want to explain the responsibilities that you had in your role to address the situation. So this is where you are outlining your previous objectives. That's really important to do here. You want to make sure to give the interviewer a clear idea of what the problem was and what your initial goals were, again. And then we'll move to A, action. You want to mention what you did to fix the problem or help the project to be successful, right? So what did you specifically do here? You want to describe any specific skills, qualities that you possess that made a significant difference during the execution stage of the project or the assignment. And then finally, we're going to talk about R, which is the result. This is where you're going to be telling the interviewer about the outcome of the situation, right? So how did your particular contributions influence the results? What did you learn from the whole experience? What were your accomplishments and how did they surpass expectations? If you can talk about metrics, numbers, and percentages as different ways to describe these positive results, that is ideal. So for example, maybe the result was that at the end of the project, you helped your team to increase productivity by 30% and save 4 hours of everyone's time in the process, right? Those are some very tangible ways that someone who wasn't there could listen to those metrics and have an idea of the strong results that you helped someone with. So let's talk a little bit more about the STAR method in action. So here are some tips that we work with our clients on. First, you want to think about 2 to 3 accomplishments ahead of time, right? So this helps you to not have a lot of filler words like when you're talking during the interview. It also helps you from having long pauses during your interview where you're thinking of what you want to say because you've already thought about a few accomplishments that you want to bring up as responses to behavioral interviewing questions. Also, you want to review common behavioral interviewing questions, right? I mentioned some earlier in this presentation, but there are a lot more that you can find. And also there are a lot more that we share in our guide that you'll hear more about later. Also, you don't want to spend more than 30 seconds on each part of the STAR method. This is a big deal because most people are long-winded and they go on and on and on in their responses to questions. You do not want to do that. Practice and prepare. So this might sound obvious, but you need to practice for your interview. It's so obvious that many people skip it and regret it later. I recommend that you review your responses with trusted individuals, your interview coach, a mentor, or a colleague in your industry. You will notice that I did not mention friends and family here. Again, similar to what we talked about last month, if you were on that webinar, your friends and family can be very helpful in your life, but they are usually the most biased when it comes to you and your career. So your mom and your sister may love you, right? And they may listen to, you talk and discuss some interviewing questions and whatnot, and they say, oh, you're great, or, everything's fine. And they don't really have constructive ideas or suggestions that they can give you. And that might be because they haven't worked in the same industry. They're not familiar with that company or their job role, those sorts of things, right? And the other extreme with family members and friends is unfortunately kind of common as well. Some people have family members and friends who don't really trust them or really see their gifts and their talents and the skills that they can bring to a new job. So family and friends might give someone overwhelmingly negative amounts of feedback just because, again, they might be biased for some reason, right? So for those reasons, I highly recommend as a coach that people work with individuals who can provide the most objective feedback and support, as you see here. So this is going to take us to our second poll question for everyone. Where do you struggle most during interviews? Is it not being nervous? Is it clearly articulating what I want to say, your speech? Is it thinking of good responses to questions? Or is it making a strong connection with the interviewer and the company?
All right, I'll give it a couple more seconds here.
All right, it looks like it's a good split here between the top three. It seems like a lot of people struggle with not being nervous, clearly articulating what they want to say, thinking of good responses, and then just a few people mentioned making those strong connections. All right, good insights, good insights. So we will move to the next one. All right. As I mentioned before, most professionals overestimate their interviewing ability and their likability. Today, it's common to not receive any feedback from companies that you interview with. If they decide to go in another direction, a lot of times you'll just never hear about it. And then in the event that you do get some insight into why a hiring manager chose another candidate, it's often a vague response, something along the lines of, oh, we found someone who's a better fit, right? And that can be very frustrating to hear because a lot of times by the point where you are interviewing and further along in the interviewing process, you generally meet or are pretty close to meeting all of the requirements that you might have seen in the job description, the credentials that they were asking for, maybe the experience that they were asking for. So it just gets frustrating. And a lot of times people are wondering, well, why, when I have the same credentials, did I not get that opportunity? And the key to most interviews is coming across as likable. Sometimes when I talk about likability, people say, well, this sounds unfair or it sounds subjective. And, depending on, the situation, it can be very subjective. But the reality is, subconsciously and even consciously, this is how a lot of hiring decisions are made. Usually, most candidates that kind of move to the end of the process, right, going through all the interviews, most of those candidates have the same or very similar levels of education, levels of experience, skills and competencies. So therefore, the interview is really designed to see if they enjoy being around you, if they think that you're a good culture fit, is another term that people say a lot, for their company, right? So basically, it really kind of winds down to, do they like you, right? So we're going to talk about 4 ways to be more likable during an interview. So number 1, you want to find a connection. You want to be memorable in the right way. So I recommend that our clients research their interviewer ahead of time on LinkedIn. There's a ton of information on LinkedIn, as I'm sure most of you know. You want to look for things like, did you ever work in the same city or in the same industry or in a similar role as your interviewer? Did you attend the same university maybe? Did you get a similar degree perhaps to your interviewer? And if there is a connection that you can find, you want to slip it into the conversation in a way that's not so obvious. So you might say, well, thank you, Joe. That's a great question. I remember seeing that you have a degree in psychology, and I also have a degree in psychology. And I think that question really, really speaks to that, or something like that, right? Also, you want to know their name and use it. Using someone's name and their first name, even more so than their last name, has been shown to really help with building a connection and that rapport between people. Number 2, you want to be conscious of your body language. So what is your initial impression that you make on people? A lot of times when I'm working with clients directly, I might ask them, what have your friends told you that they thought about you when they first met you? Or another question, another way of asking is, how have your friends described your personality when they first met you? Right? A lot of times our friends might say, oh, when I first met you, I thought you were like this, but the more I got to know you, I actually realized that you're like that, right? You'll get that feedback of how you came across initially, and that's what you want to know. Those first impressions, generally, you can get an idea of how most people think you are, kind of when they first meet you. Also, you want to smile, nod, and appear engaged. This one is really important for the introverts. I'm raising my hand. I'm an introvert. And a lot of times, if you're an introvert or if you're just a hard to read person, people might not know what you're thinking, right? So you have to be cognizant that you're letting people know that you're interested in the opportunity, right? And they need to see that in your facial expressions. Also, you want to make sure that you're in a natural kind of sitting position or standing position. If you're, sometimes you're walking and you're touring an office or a facility, you want to make sure if you're sitting down that you're kind of leaned back. You don't want to be leaning forward kind of in an aggressive way or in a pursuit kind of way. Sometimes people don't even realize that they're doing that body language. The interviewer can feel pursued, right? So you want to make sure you're kind of lean back naturally. Also, you want to make sure that you have open body language, right? So you're not crossing your arms or, doing anything that kind of makes you seem closed off. Number 3, you want to listen as much as possible. Listening shows that you're paying attention and that you're not trying to dominate the conversation. Many people are very anxious And sometimes people feel desperate when they're in an interview. And when they talk, other people can pick up on that, right? They can pick up on that nervous energy. They can pick up on, any desperation that you might be feeling, right? And so a lot of times they're picking up on that based off of what you're saying. And so what you want to make sure that you're doing is that you're not slipping into like what I call proving energy, right? Where I'm trying to prove to you over and over and over again and like drive it home, over and over again that you're the best fit, because sometimes that energetically people kind of, it's a cause for concern, I'll say. You also want to make sure that you're not talking over people, right? And that you're not coming across as a know-it-all, in your interview. And so listening can help you not fall into those traps. Also, listening shows that you're easy to work with and that you're self-aware, right? I recommend that you practice active listening, right? So you're nodding your head, as you're listening. You might be taking some notes, just all things that show that you're really listening to the interviewer. This also allows your interviewer to feel like they're being heard. And number 4, you want to keep it positive. Again, this sounds obvious, but it can be very difficult to do because of those behavioral interviewing questions that we talked about earlier, right? You might get asked a behavioral interviewing question that is probing deeply into a negative situation, a challenge, or an experience where something failed, right? What you want to do is you want to resist the temptation to speak negatively about a company, about a coworker, about a situation. That's very, very important. What you want to do is you want to try to word your past experience in a positive way. You can do that with your word choice, right? Not using kind of overly negative words. I had one client recently where I told her, just stop using the word can't, because she would use the word can't at least 10 times, in about 30 seconds to a minute, right? And so if she's in an interview and she's talking about, I can't, what about I can't do this and I can't, like, it's not reassuring to an interviewer, right? So you want to be positive in that word choice. And then finally, you want to end every answer on a positive note. So let's say they ask you a behavioral question about something that failed, and you explain that project, but you don't want to leave your response on that negative kind of failure, so to speak. What you want to say is, and even though, as I mentioned, that project wasn't as successful as I hoped it would have been, I learned A, B, and C. And next time, if we had to do it all over again, I'm sure that applying that information and maybe making this change could help us get a positive result. Right, so that's an example. So case studies. We had a client who had gone on 4 interviews and she was repeatedly not landing job offers. Sometimes she would hear back from people, sometimes she wouldn't hear anything, it would be radio silent. And so she utilized this information that we've talked about today. We dug a little deeper with her, I should say, than we've done, obviously. But she was really able to take these core skills that I've talked about, some of our other strategies, and then she was able to use that information quickly. I mean, within, I want to say, a week or 2 weeks, and she had landed multiple job offers at the district manager level. And this was a really big deal for her after hearing those 4 no's kind of in succession, and knowing that, hey, she needed a little bit of help with that. So just wanted to share that case study with you all. And now to talk about that AC interview guide. For those of you who've been listening to this presentation and you know that now is your time to start landing job offers, Our Ace the Interview Guide can be what you need. It's a foundational manual that I've written with exercises for you to work through that can be helpful for you when it comes to preparation of any situation that might arise during the interview. It walks you through various interview formats, how to identify and discuss your secret sauce, which helps you stand out. We also have question banks, so questions that you should prepare for. Some of them are behavioral interviewing, some of them are just other common questions. Also questions that you should be asking your potential employers, right? If you get to the end of the interview and someone says, do you have any questions? And you say no, not a good idea. Not a good idea. You want to have some thought-provoking questions that show that you're a critical thinker and that you're interested in the role. Also, in the Ace the Interview Guide, we talk about different approaches to salary discussions and negotiation, along with many other things. So you will get a link to the Ace the Interview Guide so you can go check that out. All right, another quote. Job interviews are like first dates. Good impressions count, awkwardness can occur, and outcomes are unpredictable. So this is a funny quote that really hits the nail on the head. There's a lot that we have no control over when it comes to an interview, but if you are prepared, you can feel more confident in your interviews. So that is it. I just want to say thank you all for taking some time to explore the world of interviewing and the STAR method, which might have been new for some of you. We've covered a lot of valuable information that you can incorporate into what you're already doing during your interviews to really have a significant effect on your results. If you have any questions or comments, you can feel free to contact me. And for those of you that are serious about your interview preparation, I'd highly recommend that Ace the Interview Guide. So thank you for joining me.
All right, I do want to open it up really quick for some questions if anyone has any for Porschia specifically. And I can give a couple seconds here so everyone can type something in. And I'll be right back. All right, so there's a couple already here for you, Porschia. I know you kind of touched on this already. I don't know if you want to just re-go over the how to get your products. I have a couple in here asking where you get the ACE guide, how do they obtain the workbook? So maybe just reiterate that really quickly.
Yes, with the recording that is going to come out, you will have a link in that email to the Ace the Interview Guide. Josh is going to make sure that that's in there. So you can click on that link. You'll find out all the details about the guide.
Perfect. So here's another one we have. LinkedIn shows that when you review a profile, do interviewers find this activity strange?
So what you can do is you can turn on your privacy settings in LinkedIn so that your name does not come up when you review a profile. So good point. And yes, that can happen. What you can do is you can just Google LinkedIn profile viewing privacy settings. And in the privacy settings, there's a way to turn that off.
All right, I'll give it one more minute here just to see if any other ones. A lot of these were the same question, so I just kind of put it into one question for you. All right, here's one. I always struggle with coming up with specific examples or experiences that relate to the interview's questions. Yeah, do you have any tips for that at all?
Yes. So to the point that I mentioned about, think about 2 to 3 accomplishments from your past. I recommend that when you think about 2 to 3 special projects, initiatives, things that you were really a pivotal part of the success, when you think about those projects, and maybe you might want to, sometimes I recommend our clients to just create a bulleted list of the STAR method and write out what happened in that project. If you really flush that out, most of our clients actually find that those 2 to 3 projects can be the answers for multiple behavioral interviewing questions. So for example, I would guess that if most people on this call wrote out 3 different projects that they were a pivotal part of, at least one of those projects, there was some timeline pressure, right? You had a deadline coming up. I would guess that in at least one of those projects, maybe there were some conflicting personalities, right? Some people who didn't agree, didn't see eye to eye. How was that handled, right? So once you start digging into those accomplishments, usually you can use one scenario or 2 scenarios as the answer to multiple behavioral interviewing questions.
All right, now we'll just leave it at this one then here. So we have one last one. Is having a LinkedIn profile mandatory? This person does not use social media at this time.
Is it mandatory? No. Is it strongly encouraged? Yes. And we talked about LinkedIn in the webinar from last month. What's interesting is that over 90% of internal recruiters, so these are people at the companies that you apply for, over 90% of them are going to go and check you out on LinkedIn after they review your resume, but before they even decide to interview you. So they're looking for information. Now, again, if you are, we'll say, applying for a role at a very competitive company, if the software technology said, hey, these 50 resumes are potentially a good fit, well, you know, they're looking to narrow that list down to the 10 or 15 people that they reach out to for phone screenings. If they can't find you on LinkedIn, what's to say that they don't go with the people who they find LinkedIn profiles that are in alignment with their resume, and they get an idea of who that person is. So I think that having a strong LinkedIn profile definitely increases your odds of, one, getting an interview. So I highly recommend it.
All right, well, I just want to take the time to thank you very much, Portia. You gave a ton of extremely helpful information, and I think everyone can take something from that. And I want to leave this information up for everyone that is watching, just in case you need to contact anybody. And then I do want to leave it with just a reminder to check out the new redesigned site that we have in for diversity jobs. There you can find our next webinar, sign up for all different other things, get some resources to help you through your job search. Yeah, and that's all I have for today. Thank you so much again, Portia, and thank you for everyone that joined today. All right, have a great day, everybody.